Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir from the Resource Works Society. He's the executive director. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Hey, Jim. Thank you.
Stewart, Aboriginal people, again, it's kind of a myth. We see protests in Vancouver all the time. Somebody beating a native drum, claiming we're here representing the Aboriginal people of British Columbia and Canada. We're against this project. We think this one's bad. Cancel all mining, all oil, all gas. We don't need it. We can just, I don't know what, huddle up around a fire, which means you have to cut down all the trees.
Yes. Well, yes, we do see that so often. And, you know, what's amazing to those who go beyond the city, beyond hope, as some people in Vancouver like to say, and see what's really going on all around Western Canada, it's actually a completely different story, because that's where you find the First Nations that are engaged in business opportunities. They're partnering in solar arrays. They are looking at mining opportunities. They are setting up cannabis businesses. There's a great company I was talking to recently. They've got they're roasting coffee in Ontario. Like, there's no business that First Nations people aren't in Canada, and as far as I can tell, want to be more involved in. I mean, let's face it, we've still got a huge social gap in terms of living standards that's very measurable and evident every day in different ways. That is honestly a black mark on Canada, and we have to solve it. And the best way we can do that is to allow people to achieve the things they want to achieve. I mean, who's to say what people want to do? That's up to them. And if they want to achieve prosperity and get out of poverty, that's a pretty reasonable thing to want to do. And we see a growing movement of Indigenous people in Canada who are getting more involved. And proof of that was last week. There was a conference last Thursday and Friday that was based out of a BC organization. Now it's a national organization after meeting with Success here, the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. They heard from diverse speakers such as Mark Carney, a former Bank of Canada governor, talking about the challenges of First Nations groups, be it individual First Nations or development corporations or individual entrepreneurs, to secure the capital. I mean, there's all sorts of institutional problems, such as the Indian Act, which makes it really hard for a First Nation to borrow money to invest, because they can't secure it against property the way that you can secure, a freehold property. You've got a mortgage on it. You know, that's security. If you fail to meet your obligations, the bank will take over your house. Okay, we all understand that, but First Nations, they don't have property that can be secured that way, because it's bound into complex legal agreements. So it's one of those challenges that many smart people in Canada are working to resolve. And as I think the lid comes off these opportunities, and First Nations grow and grow in their success, they own airlines in the north. There are all kinds of more complex business organizations that are growing up and around, and so much so that I think more and more businesses that are not First Nations want to figure out, hey, how can we partner? And our group, Resource Works, we're working with a number of Indigenous organizations, including the First Nations Major Projects people and the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. We're partnering with them at the end of May. We're going to do a 2-day event for people who are looking at the practical. How do we, as a business, start a relationship? Do we pick up a phone and call the chief of the First Nation? What do we do? Well, sure, you can do that. It's a good idea. But there's a lot of other things that people are asking about this. So we're bringing experts together. We're bringing some global authorities on this who are interested. And if anyone wants to know more about it, there's a website. Here it is, IPSS, Indigenous Partnerships Success Showcase 2021.com, IPSS2021.com. There's information. The tickets are available. It's a 2-day event. It's a very accessible cost, and First Nations are able to claim tickets free of charge. We want to make sure as many Indigenous Canadians are able to be part of this as possible. So we're quite excited about it. Our team is working on that. And, I think just to close that one off, Jim, I would say that the success of Canada as a country in future depends to a great, great degree on the success of Indigenous Canadians achieving their dreams through being part of shared success. And businesses are an enormous driver in that.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, there seems to be this movement that I guess people who live in big cities don't understand where the resources and the money comes from to run their particular organization. We have them calling for oil and gas to be shut down immediately, stop exploration, not giving us any chance to look for alternatives. They want things shut down now. How realistic is that?
Yeah, it's not really realistic. I think most people, most listeners of yours understand that, say, if you look at the question of energy transition or transformation, we hear a lot about this. And, there's probably, maybe one person in 10 who thinks, okay, in 10 years, we won't have any more gasoline or diesel or natural gas or coal. We'll be using, some other form of energy. Now, when you consider that about 80% of our global energy diet today comes from fossil fuels, and you think in 10 years we just won't use any more. Well, how do you do that? And I think anyone who's kind of asking the next question, where do we get the energy from, is realizing that it's not easy to do that. So the idea that there's this energy transition that will be, finished by the year 2030. Maybe 1 in 10 person thinks that, but it's not really, provable. I think we have, probably a bigger share of the population who think that it's going to be several decades, like 30 or more years before we start to get even to the sort of halfway point of that transition. And I think that becomes we can get our heads around that. We have to work for 3 decades. We need some scientific and technical innovation. We have to, if you buy a car right now, a lot of people, they more and more drive cars for a long time because they're so well made. The quality control on modern automobiles is great. The fuel economy on a gasoline car, it's not like you're buying a 70s gas guzzler. My first car, Jim, tell me what yours was. Mine was a Delta 88. It had a 427 in it. It was an absolute monster. And no one's driving cars like that anymore. Thank goodness. What was your first one?
I actually bought a Honda Civic.
A Honda Civic. Yeah.
I was one of the very first people in Regina to own a Honda Civic. And I paid cash for it. I saved up $5,000. By the way, folks, in 1976, you could buy a brand new car for $5,000.
Well, when you were buying a new Honda Civic, I was probably buying a 10 or 15-year-old Delta 88. So I didn't save. I think I paid $500 for it. I was a cheapskate. Unlike you, you're smart and financially organized. But at that age, I wasn't. I just wanted some wheels, and they had, it had a radio in it that I loved. I loved the radio in that car, so I bought it.
Yeah, I saved up the money I made working construction between grades 11 and 12. Where I drove a D8 Cat breaking land in Peace River, Alberta, the last original homestead land in North America. And so I drove at 1 mile an hour, breaking up the land with a giant plow. Believe me, what a boring job, because the fields were 1 mile long, so it took you an hour to do the length of the field. You turned around and did the same thing again. But made loads of money.
And then you got into journalism.
And
Slightly
then
more exciting.
if I hadn't saved all that money from construction, I would have starved to death working in radio.
Well, that was a while back, and everyone is prognosticating about the future, but we don't really know. A couple of weeks ago, there was an interesting question. It went to the Metro Vancouver board. That's 21 municipalities. It came from the City of Vancouver, which is known, that City of Vancouver Council, for being a little bit out there or a lot out there. They certainly have earned their reputation for their green activism, and they've recently passed at the City of Vancouver, Canby Street, a motion to ban all fossil fuel investment, all exploration in any sort of mineral development that involve fossil fuels, any sort of infrastructure. They actually signed this at the City of Vancouver. Now, if you're working in downtown Vancouver and paying taxes, and your company's paying taxes, and you're maybe involved in the law profession, and your clients maybe are natural gas companies or miners, the City of Vancouver, you can look it up, they actually voted to legislate you out of existence. Fortunately, they don't have the power to do that, but they, I think unanimously on the council, which surprised me a little bit. So, having done that, now here's what gets interesting, Jim. The City of Vancouver said, hey, let's go see if we can persuade the other 20 municipalities who belong to the Metro Vancouver Council if they would do the same thing. Let's all get together and vote for this. What do you think happened? Well, they took that, it went to the floor, and boy, it got interesting at this point. So, the mayor of Port Coquitlam, Brad West, he looked at this, and he made a really great statement. It's on our website at resourceworks.com. If you look in the news and views there, you can see. But one of the points he made was, look, it's very easy for you folks at the City of Vancouver City Council to talk about getting rid of other people's jobs. Maybe you should, consider what it sounds like to those whose jobs you're just saying, let's get rid of them, because that's not a good reflection of how things are seen by most municipalities. And in fact, we saw leaders from the mayor of Richmond, Malcolm Brody, the mayor of North Vancouver, Linda Buchanan, the mayor of Langley, Jack Froese, mayor of Burnaby, Mike Hurley. Now here is a mayor who's opposed to Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. Even that mayor in Burnaby said, hey, wait a minute. And I think what we're seeing today, Jim, is I call it extreme aspirationalism. I mean, I don't really believe that the City of Vancouver Council think that by passing this motion to ban any investment in any sort of fossil fuel immediately, they actually think that that's going to happen. It's more, in their minds, I suspect, we're going to aspire to do that. And by aspiring to do that, we will inspire other people to, use less fuels or seek cleaner, less greenhouse gas intensive activities and that sort of thing. That's probably what they were thinking. But as Mayor West said, it's really easy to say there's going to be a just transition and we're going to move workers into different industries when you're not the one losing your job. I mean, that was one of those Zoom calls. If it was a live in-person statement, I'm sure there would have been raucous applause because it's such a common sense statement, and also it's incredibly ironic. If that was done, you would end the production of, as one example, BC metallurgical coal that is needed to make steel for wind turbines. It would end the production of natural gas that is used to, as LNG develops, used to help other countries achieve their greenhouse gas targets. So actually, the City of Vancouver's intentions may be stemming from good intentions, but actually they would have the exact opposite outcome, which is, of course, very typical of extreme aspirationalism. Invariably, it's the opposite outcome that these extremists wind up promoting, which is not their intention.
Yes, to make a solar display, or array, I should say, you need steel and aluminum for the framing. You need silver to make the mirrors. All those things come out of the ground.
Yeah, that's right.
And most mining is going to have trucking or some kind of way to get that stuff out. And there's a lot of chemical processes that use fossil products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the other fascinating things is that even though I think a lot of people in business, probably a lot of your listeners, would understand that BC and Canada have an export-based economy, which is to say that we produce trade goods that we exchange with others to give us the things we need that we don't make ourselves. You know, we can't make our own orange juice. We don't make our own iPhones. We don't make enough cars to supply the number of cars we need. So we have to trade things. What do we trade? Do we trade rocks well, actually we do. We can trade rocks if they've got value in them, but also manufactured things, a lot of lumber made from timber that we produce, lots of metallic goods that are made from mining, and energy products, and this is really the bread and butter. It's about 80% of our exports. 75 to 80% of our exports of BC are resource-related commodities that come from the forest industry and mining and energy industries, and that's what lets us get the things we need. But the other thing about trade is it pays for the services we provide to citizens. So everyone wants to go to when you have to go to the hospital, say, you know, everyone expects there to be the lights on at the emergency room. And every year the cost of doing that to the public purse is higher. Not just, you know, more dollars through inflation like everything else, but it actually is a higher share of the public sector spending. And that's only going to continue in the current cycle because there's more of us getting older, and that proportion of healthcare needs obviously getting way more expensive. How do we pay for it? You know, those who are saying, oh, let's just get out of all the things that produce exports are also saying, even though they probably wouldn't, you know, I've pointed it out to some people who say this, and I've said to them, you know, what you're saying, what you're advocating for when you say stop all the resource exports, you're also saying stop having money for healthcare. They're saying, no, I'm not. I'm not saying that. But you are saying that. You're implying that because you're implying that we don't need money to pay for things. But we do. I mean, that's reality. You may not wish it was that way, but it is. It is how the world works. We need money to pay for things.
Did any of those Vancouver politicians have cell phones? There's 61 different metals and rare earths in a cell phone.
Oh, they've all got cell phones. They've all got 2 cell phones. Have you ever noticed people in politics, you sit down with them and have a coffee, they've always got 2 cell phones. Sometimes they've got 3 cell phones. But anyways.
Is one of them a burner?
I would never suggest such a thing. But they usually have the business phone, and then they have a personal phone. And they might have, if they're, you know, then in elected office, they got another phone that the government gives them. So they've got like 2 or 3 phones. Very common. Too many phones. So they're much more reliant on mining than the average person is, just because of that. I hadn't thought of that, but
have you ever seen a cell phone antenna tower? Is that made out of sticks?
Yeah, well, and they have to work really hard at the phone companies to make them, you know, look like they're not cell phone towers, because whenever it comes into a neighborhood, there's inevitably there's someone who pops up and says, no, that's going to give me brain cancer. We can't have that here. And there was a great instance in, I think it was TELUS. They had in Revelstoke, they had some residents, like one house of residents. Half of Revelstoke had a terrible signal, and there was a plan. We're going to put a tower up on that hill, and then everyone will have great cell coverage in Revelstoke. But there was this one house. The residents were blocking it. They were literally surrounding the site, blocking the road. And here's the day it changed, was when the local newspaper reporter was driving by, and there's the leader of the Stop the Cell Phone Tower movement of Revelstoke standing there talking on his cell phone. The editor snapped a picture of it, put it in the paper, and the whole thing just went away, which is a classic example of the sort of contradictions we have on these issues.
Yeah, whenever I see these protesters against crude and natural gas show up, how did you get here? Did you walk all the way from Prince George? Because anything's going to use energy. And frankly, right now, as a consumer, you don't know where it comes from.
Yeah. I mean, if that person had traveled from Prince George in a pipeline, that would probably be the most energy efficient way of them doing that. Now, of course, you wouldn't want to do that. But it's a very energy efficient way to travel and to move
Well,
commodities.
We do have Elon Musk's hyperlink. which is basically humans traveling in a pipeline.
Well, exactly. That's basically what it is. And, maybe we should be looking at that. Maybe that's the long term, maybe in 100 years when we've moved the last barrel of oil through a pipeline, we can convert it either to, maybe water is the commodity that will be moved in 100 years because we want to get it from, the Rockies or the Arctic to
the head of Nestle doesn't believe the water is a human right, but it's actually a commodity, and they're now trading water on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's only for California so far, but take a look what happened in Texas during the power failure. People were getting power bills for $16,000, $25,000 for their power use for one day because they thought they were lucky because all the other neighbors were blacked out, but they still had juice to the lights.
Yeah,
maybe
well,
not
Jack
so lucky.
Nicholson in Chinatown saw all this coming decades ago. Water intrigue. And, the Texas thing is interesting, because there's some, it's complicated down there. You've got these markets that have been, privatized over the years, and they have all these competitors, and then all of a sudden something like this comes along, and then the real market prices that they've unleashed there. We're kind of lucky to have the regulated utilities to the extent we have in BC, because we will just never have that happen. But it's a time of uncertainty. I think a lot of people are saying, okay, well, if we do this, what happens, without considering the full extent of what happens when you change your energy systems. You've got Washington State, the whole northwest of the U.S. is going through a lot of regulatory changes and supply changes in terms of where they get energy. They've got a strong drive to decarbonize and be more like BC. I mean, BC is a model. If the rest of the world was like BC, we wouldn't have a greenhouse gas problem, because BC gets 95% plus of its electricity from green sources. So for those people that can only aspire to be like BC, they have to be a little more enterprising than we have had to be in terms of that energy supply. You've got Washington State. They're looking at bringing in a lot more wind from Montana. That's how they think that they can do this. But they also need to have natural gas backup. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I know there's sort of an energetic communications effort to persuade the public that no, you don't need any of those reliable, affordable energy sources. Just have renewables that are fine on their own. And it turns out, as Texas found, they're not so fine on their own. You do need to have these renewables backed up by gas.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, I remember we chatted about this at the start of the pandemic last March, that copper is a natural antiviral, antibacterial material, I guess, and or has antibacterial and viral activity in it. It uses the ions, the metal itself. It's a chemical reaction that takes place with those bad bugs and kills them. Well, now TransLink, the transit authority in Greater Vancouver, has done an experiment where they put copper sheathing on the handholds on some transit vehicles. I think it was SkyTrain, the rapid transit system, and their study found that, yes, copper does kill the germs that people leave there on their hands, and they're looking to expand that experiment. Is this good news for BC's copper industry?
Well, it's a big industry in the sense of mining because we have copper produced in BC. It's a very large part of the economy, actually, and the idea that we could expand its consumer use is a very welcome one. I think it sends a good message to remind people that we need to continue to have the supply of copper. This is probably one of the more visible manifestations of copper. Most copper we use, you don't really see it unless you open up that, electrical box or strip that wire or open up that battery. But there it is on plain display. So they tested it last November. They announced they would try this out, and sure enough, as you say, Jim, the effectiveness of copper to kill bacteria very quickly. And you imagine the cost savings if you don't have to maybe have it as much cleaning services going to trains and buses as you would if the bacteria are just going to live on those touched surfaces. So, and also imagine just the ease of mind that it gives your riders if they could go in, you're touching that. I mean, even at the best of times pre-COVID, who didn't think, I'm going to grab that pole? Really? I think I'll just lean on it. But you then need to grip it because the bus jerks. And so there you are holding onto that pole. Who knows what's on that thing? And the good news, so they started that in November, and now the second phase, TransLink with Tech Resources, which is a great Vancouver-based company down at Bentall 5 on Burrard, but they have a global business, incredible company. They're going to install copper barriers on more train cars and buses, and then they're going to do some more testing. So it's a pretty cool local story.
Of course, silver has many of the same properties as well as for killing germs, but copper's probably more affordable. Canada's largest company, Shopify, is investing in direct air capture as a carbon offset option. Is this good news for Canada?
Yes, it is. I mean, carbon capture is probably not quite a household term yet. I think, again, a lot of your listeners are people who pay attention to this stuff, and I'm sure most know what I'm talking about. But, these are machines, if we're talking about direct air capture, that basically suck CO2 from the atmosphere to offset the emissions. And, anyone who looks at the magnitude of the emissions problem, would have to agree that we need to do more than just simply, have more efficient cars or switch to electric cars over time or, all these, carbon taxes. Like that's all well and good, but it's not going to change things until we have on a grand scale, carbon capture. And there's different ways to capture carbon. I mean, you can, if you have a coal-fired electricity generating plant, you can capture the carbon in the stack, and then you need to find a thing to do with it. You can inject it into underground wells. You can use it in stimulating oil wells and leave it underground like that. You can turn it into products. There's all these different uses, but this idea of direct air capture, I think, is attracting a lot of attention. There was actually a startup out of UBC, Carbon Engineering. They got going in Squamish, and now they're finding success in the USA. This is a reminder that if we're going to actually make a difference to taking out 200 years worth of emissions from the Industrial Revolution up to today, and of course into the future of using fossil fuels, we need to take big action. I mean, large scale is what it's all about. So Shopify, huge company, incredible Canadian story, largest company in Canada, is pretty smart to get into this space because I think it's going to accelerate some of the innovation. There's a lot more work to do in this regard. We're hoping that this week it was announced the federal budget in Canada is going to be on April 19th. I had a chance to speak to our Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, recently. There was a call, the Surrey Board of Trade. We had a chance to speak to the minister, and I said that the regulation they've used in the United States to accelerate the carbon capture industry has been a very good one there. It's resulted in more than 25 carbon capture projects. In Canada, we've got, a handful, some good projects, good technology, world-leading technology in a couple of cases, but it's not moving quickly enough. So there's a number of us that have written to the minister and spoken with the minister about some measures that we hope will start to surface in this April budget that will let Canada be a much player. I mean, with so much potential in terms of geology, in terms of the innovation that's already happened, like in Saskatchewan and Alberta in particular, and BC, that we can be a national, a world leader in this. And I hope we get there.
You also had a good story coming out from the resource industry. What is it?
Oh, yes. Thanks for the chance to remind me of that. So the Sightsee Dam, we hear a lot about that dam. It's going to be underway over the next several years until it's completed. It was in the news recently, of course, when it seemed there were some questions over its future, which have now been resolved as the province of British Columbia, the Premier, said, we're going to finish this thing. We are determined to have this source of clean energy. So that's happening. Now that the cloud there has been lifted, there's a good news story that's come out. It turns out that very quietly, the Sightsee Work Camp, which is run by ATCO, it's called Two Rivers Lodge. I visited there a couple of years ago. It's sensational. They have a gym. Bring your tennis racket if you work at Sightsee. They've actually got a tennis court out there, or a couple of them. It's not that people go there to play tennis. I mean, it's not going to compete with Wimbledon as a tennis venue, frankly, Jim. But they do go to the way to make sure that while you're there in your off hours, you can have a nice life and not miss home too much. They've got good communication, so you can call home every day and all that. It's kind of a nice place to be, considering its location. It's remote from the city of Fort St. John. But anyways, with the number of people there, thousands of beds, they have got to feed those people too. And inevitably, no matter how well managed a construction camp work program is and food program, you've got extra food. And they have been delivering hundreds of meals a day from Fort St. John into Fort St. John from Sightsee, which is only a few miles away, so that the Salvation Army can distribute them through their Community and Family Services Food Bank program. And that's now resulted, here's the news, 50,000 pounds of surplus food from Sightsee has been diverted from landfill and sent to feed the hungry. So it's a great little story.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us. And again, maybe remind people about the conference you have about how Aboriginal people can get investment in their projects.
That's right. And it's really the future of partnerships. So any business enterprise, big or small, partnering with First Nations to advance the success of that business enterprise in all kinds of areas. We've got a conference on that coming up. I really encourage listeners to check it out. IPSS2021.com. That stands for Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase. It's going to be great. I hope people can look into it.
Stewart, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. His Twitter handle, @SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HoweStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online.